Everyone, this is Paul Gale from PaulGaleNetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game news. It is October 23rd, 2020, and these are the top stories of the day. To kick things off, we learned that Super Mario 3D All-Stars just set a record, and that is for the highest selling Mario game in terms of digital units sold in a 1-month time frame. As you know, the game came out this past September, and it has totaled 1.8 million digital units sold in less than 1 full month's worth of time. And that's very impressive. It's going to be great to get the numbers for how much it did throughout the whole month of September, both digital and physical, in the United States, Japan, European markets, everywhere else. But we'll have to wait a little bit longer to find that out, as Nintendo does create and make available its quarter financial results every 3 months. So when that comes out, I will definitely provide an update. But I thought I would share that today. Over 1.8 million units sold digitally. Best-selling Mario game in an opening month from digital sales perspective. Very impressive. Next up, thanks to Project Bluebird, or TY Bluebird on Twitter, we have the first shot, if I'm not mistaken, of Resident Evil's movie being filmed. As you can see, this sign right here says Raccoon City. You could tell that the production is underway. They're filming. This shot in particular is from Canada. So thank you, Project Bluebird, for supplying this photo. It's kind of nice. We don't have much to go off of, but we see at least what a bridge looks like, and we've got that famous umbrella logo next to Raccoon City. So that's kind of cool. Next up in video game news, and actually last today, it's not a big day in terms of the amount of different things to talk about, but the last thing to talk about is pretty important, and that's what Michael Pachter had to say, because it's a very interesting statement, and it's causing a lot of confusion and resentment to what he had to say online today. First of all, Michael Pachter is a video game analyst, stock market investor, analyst of that territory as well. I had the opportunity to meet with him and have a good chat at E3 2019. That's where this photo was taken. But he did an interview today with GamingBolt.com, and I'm going to read you the quote. "I don't really understand the whole hybrid project. I think that was something Iwata did to differentiate the Switch, and he wanted to have a console that could go back and forth from console to portable. But I don't think most people play it in both modes. I would say that maybe 20% of Switch owners play both modes, and I think most Switch owners play it handheld only. So honestly, I don't understand the whole point of the hybrid. Who cares? Play it as a handheld. And Nintendo isn't that smart, so you never know what they will do next. But I think the smart thing would be to get rid of the Switch console and only have the Switch Lite. Get rid of the docking station, get rid of playing on TV, maybe offer a Fire Stick dongle for those who do want to play it on TV. But I just think that a portable-only Switch makes the most sense. It's the cheapest to make, and they could make the screen nicer and the build quality better." And then he also went on to say that he's not sure what we will see from them, being Nintendo next generation, if there will be an upgrade to the processing power. He said that they should at least put some flash memory in it so you can download games and not have to mess around with cartridges. If you want to read the full article, go to GamingBolt.com. But let's go over Michael Pachter's comments. Respectfully saying, I've got to say, I completely disagree. Nintendo Switch is such a polarizing console because it is just that. It truly is a hybrid. What's there to get? You're getting current generation competent graphics, current generation competent games with the size and scope of what modern, current gen platforms can produce. And you're taking that and being able to bring it on the go. has never been done before. You've always had portable gaming, Game Boy has been around, Game Gear from back in the day. Nomad, for instance, came out a few years after Sega Genesis, and it was able to bring you console gaming quality on the go. But a few years later, obviously we've had DS, PlayStation Portable, PS Vita starting to get better and better, closer to the current generation respectively. But Nintendo Switch truly is the first. Here you could play it on the TV and take that very unit on the go. Giving props to Sega Genesis, it did use the same cartridges, but you did have to have two different systems. Given some props to the Game Boy player, or the Super Game Boy for Nintendo GameCube and Super Nintendo respectively, you could use the same cartridge, but you had to have a GameCube or a Super Nintendo to make them work. And all three of those things always came out a little bit later, so it was never necessarily cutting edge. But the Nintendo Switch was playing games from the same hardware competitors as they were coming out. Maybe a few months later release with something like Dragon Ball FighterZ, but with Mortal Kombat 11 at the same time. Of course, you have slightly less visual fidelity capable on Nintendo Switch. I mean, after all, it is this big compared to a console that's, this big in dimensions. So you really have to give credit to Nintendo for the wizardry that was put into the machine, and props to the developers, including porting studios, for doing such a competent job with many of these titles, bringing over big stuff like The Witcher 3, for instance, and Doom. But having that experience, having that satisfaction of taking a big game, a game that you sit in front of the TV and like to see on your 60-inch display, the next now most beautiful looking Legend of Zelda game in Breath of the Wild, and taking that on the go, sitting in a different position on the couch. I agree with the statement of it as a portable machine is fantastic, but I also disagree with the statement of nobody plays it or very few people play it in TV mode. I'm a big switcher, literally. I play in portable and in TV mode almost evenly. First of all, it's always docked. That's how it charges. That's how the Joy-Cons charge. That's how you turn on the system and you've got 8 players around your house when you are having a party, which we might not have had in a while. But when we were hosting, monthly UFC parties, birthday parties, barbecues, whatever, 8 people come around your 60-inch screen or whatever you have at home and you play together. 4 people on screen in multiplayer, cross-screen, playing Mario Kart. Could you get that many people around a portable system? Yes. But then it comes a thing of, well, you really have to have each person have his or her own Nintendo Switch to make it comfortable and ideal to play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, for instance. Does it make more sense, or is it easier, I should say, to have 8 people all playing with their own Switch, bringing it to the same party at the same time? Maybe someone doesn't have a platform. But it's easier thing to have 8 controllers, right? Certainly more affordable, especially if a couple of people have a couple of controllers each. There you go, you instantly have 8. So for that at-home TV experience, it makes sense to have it on TV. Also, unless if Nintendo were to create a dedicated console again, this is the only way to play Nintendo games on TV. And Nintendo has such a long legacy of being in the console home TV video game market, dating back to the 80s of adults and primarily kids at the time having memories and growing up with their NES, Super NES, Nintendo 64, GameCube, etc., growing up into adulthood, from having a TV maybe in the living room of their parents' house, maybe in their own bedroom, to now in their own homes and having their own entertainment center or dedicated game room to play on TV. That's where your entertainment is. We are moving into and we have been in a smartphone world for a while now. That's why we did see a little bit of a drop actually by half almost, in sales from the original DS to the 3DS. But Nintendo Switch revitalized the handheld video game market. You know, it offered something new and different. It was visual fidelity on par to current generation platforms. And that is also why I call Nintendo Switch the first ninth gen system. It is next gen. Maybe not in the visual fidelity department compared to Xbox One and PlayStation 4, despite coming out a few years later, but in overall the advancement of what it brought to the video game industry. So that console TV nature of it, you can't take that away. Like I said, if they went only Nintendo Switch Lite and didn't have a place in the market anymore for TV, that wouldn't feel very Nintendo. Nintendo's always had a dedicated home console for the TV. And, for almost as many years, they've had a handheld. The Game Boy came out after the NES. And ever since Game Boy, we've had iterations such as Game Boy Pocket and Color, DS and 3DS, Game Boy Advance right in between the Game Boy Color and DS era. And Nintendo Switch satisfies the handheld market too. But I think if it was only a handheld, it wouldn't have succeeded as much as it did, because we saw the drop from DS to 3DS. If the Nintendo Switch was, only a Nintendo Switch Lite when it came out, would it have done as well? I don't think so. People like options. Is it cheaper to produce? Yes, but you are getting less of a system. Do people complain about the Joy-Cons? Sometimes. You have people like me, 3.5 years going strong, with my original Joy-Con that came with the system, and the 2 Joy-Con that were purchased for me as a gift. So those 4 still work. I've got my blue and red that came with it, and my pair of grays, and none of them have the drift problem that a lot of people mention having. I also have a side green and yellow, and they also work fine, no drift. What's the percentage of people that overall have a problem? We're looking at 65 million Nintendo Switch owners, of which the majority are Nintendo Switch owners and not Nintendo Switch Lite owners. So what truly is the percentage of people that have experienced drift or significant drift? Every console will eventually have an analog stick that wears and tears and have its own drift. Back in the day when Nintendo created the original Nintendo 64, that analog stick eventually slowly gets a little bit wobbly, and fortunately it was built well enough that even when mine began to shake a little bit when shaking the controller, I never lost control. It never drifted on its own. But other controllers from other manufacturers, they eventually experience a drift. Now, could the Nintendo Switch's Joy-Con be of a higher percentage? Possibly. But I also think it's partially blown out of proportion. It's nowhere near as many people experiencing the problem as they do. However, if it is high enough, that is something that should be addressed, and I'm pretty sure that Nintendo will solve that in the near future. Hopefully by the time a Nintendo Switch Plus comes out, certainly before a Nintendo Switch 2 comes out. But understanding the whole hybrid concept, man, that couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. I have had a couple of experiences where I brought my Nintendo Switch to a friend's house, brought my son and daughter. We were at a friend's birthday party for the kids. Brought the Switch in the car for my son and daughter to play. The other family wasn't aware of what a Switch was, not a game-savvy family. Understands what video games are, might have had a console several years ago, but skipping a couple of generations. And here we bring this out, and we had that commercial moment where we put the Nintendo Switch in tabletop mode, slid off these 2 Joy-Cons, turned them sideways. Keep in mind, my kids are ages 5 and 3, and when this story happened, they were probably 4 and 2, respectively, like a year plus ago. And it was, what are you doing? That's Mario Kart. Oh my gosh, that looks good. Like, Wait, can I play that? And here? And you mean you could play more? Yeah, is this a portable? Yeah, you could also play it like this and click it in and whoa, you could play, wow, now this is what I'm used to. Wait, so this is Nintendo's new thing? Yeah. And it's also console on TV, by the way. What do you mean? Yeah, you can put it on TV and you have it there. Oh, I'm gonna get one. And like, I've had that experience happen several times. Not quite the I'm on an airplane, I'm on a bus, I'm on a train, and I'm playing it like they did in the commercial. But I've heard many people have that same story too. It's an attractive piece of hardware. It's new. Despite being 3.5 years old, I still have that feeling of fun when I play my Nintendo Switch. Because, first of all, the games happen to be good, so that's a plus. But also, gosh, I don't want to go back. As much as I want Nintendo to enter back into the arms race with a beefy new next gen powerhouse of a console that's a dedicated, TV 4K 120 frames per second, just badass machine. I think it makes more sense for Nintendo to continue, come to the party a few years late, have comparable technology to the competition, being, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and maybe in November 2023, release the Nintendo Switch 2 that's comparable in power to the Xbox Series S. With an advanced dock, you're getting 4K resolution and whatnot, up to 60 frames per second, maybe less visual fidelity than the other platforms. In handheld mode, maybe we're getting like a 1080p or 1440p at best screen. And there you go. Even if you have to lower some of the specs and maybe it's targeting next gen visuals at 30 frames per second, but still having all of the platforms, all of the games that come out on the other platforms for the most part on this handheld hybrid console device. That's just really attractive. And another thing I gotta say, regarding this as I'm looking over Gaming Bolt's interview with Michael Pachter is you can't just take Nintendo Switch away because it actually is the platform that outsells the Nintendo Switch Lite. When Nintendo Switch Lite first came on the market, it was the new thing. So for the first couple of weeks, obviously it outsold the Nintendo Switch. But afterwards, we saw Nintendo Switch be the one that people were favoring. It is nice to have that $100 difference for new families to buy. And maybe if, a budget is your thing. It's nice if you have kids and you want a little bit more durable of a system, maybe not to have to deal with Joy-Con issues as much. If you want to have multiple platforms in your household and you just want to share cartridges and not have, another $300 machine, you only have one TV in your house, so why have multiple, regular Nintendo Switches? That makes sense. But for the most part, people don't seem to mind spending the extra $100 for another controller that could be held sideways, so you have two on every system, and have the options are good to play on TV or on the go. And yeah, with the exception of launch and sometimes during the pandemic when Nintendo Switches were scarce and virtually sold out, those are the only times we saw Nintendo Switch Lite outsell the regular model. So no, I'm sorry, Mr. Pachter. People like the hybrid. I care. Lots of people cares. Lots of people care, I should say. And to say that Nintendo isn't smart, isn't that smart? Nintendo is definitely a company that marches to the beat of their own drum, so to speak. They don't hop on everything right away. They didn't hop into clickable analog sticks right away. They didn't go into HD gaming right away. They didn't even put a DVD player in their console yet, to date, with the exception of the Panasonic Q, the GameCube that came out only in Japan. Nintendo to this date still doesn't have a console that can play DVD movies from the get-go in the United States. Isn't that crazy? But Nintendo is very smart. They pioneer a lot of technology. For what they may fall behind in certain categories, such as not entering HD right away, they make up for it in a lot of other areas. analog stick gaming, paving the way for 6-button layout with 4 on the face and 2 up top, which later on became evolved more and more. But analog stick, rumble technology, motion tech with Wii, DS. DS really showed us what touchscreen gaming could do, and we saw that carry through beyond. Wavebird for GameCube, wireless tech in ways that we haven't seen before. And now the Nintendo Switch, this dual console setup. I'm sorry, Nintendo is smart. They do a lot. They do much more right and much more in terms of pioneering things that become popular for the industry that everybody follows than they do wrong and falling behind a couple of things and not reading the market the best in certain decisions. But overall, they're a solid company, and that's why they've been around this long. And that's why Nintendo Switch is already the second best-selling console Nintendo's ever released, next to Wii. It still has a way to go before it's, getting into DS territory, but that's overall released platforms of Nintendo's. So yeah, that was a big talk, but that was important because Michael Pachter is an analyst that's been around for a long time, and his voice is heard by a lot of people. He has a big platform. If you look at the amount of followers he has on Twitter, a lot of people look to his word. Now, I think that that's a bold claim what he made, but it's also pretty out of touch with what is reality. Everyone's got a different opinion. Mine's different than his. I'm being respectful about it, but I just think that's wrong. Some people's opinions are a little bit more warranted than others based off of, how familiar they are with the industry. I'm not saying I know it better, but I'm saying that from what I have seen, I've experienced myself, this view is wrong. Sorry. Well, let me know what you think of this whole thing, of the Nintendo Switch. Do you play on TV? Do you play on handheld? Do you play both? Do you like the way that Nintendo's going? Is this the direction that you wish for them to follow? Also, what do you think of that Resident Evil shot of Raccoon City? Pretty cool, I think. Alright. Thanks for watching. This was a fun talk. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I will see you next time for more video game news with Paul Gale Network. Take it easy. Bye.